Hitler, you probably didn't even hate the Jews. That was just the meth making you crazy, dog.
Both of you, get back in the closet. You deserve a ass whooping. All of you, get back in the closet.
How
Go
much does
yourself.
it cost for fascism? How much do the taxpayers have to pay for a fascist country?
They're evil. They are actively doing evil. So treat them like the evil that they are.
The time to start is now, right? The time to plant a tree is 10 years ago, and the second best time is now. Strikes are the most effective way to stop profits, get demands, and force policy changes. If you can shut down profit, you can make any politician do anything.
It's time to stop pretending otherwise. It's time to be ruthless, and time to afford them the same amount of grace that they give to their Palestinian victims, because they are only going to get more and more ruthless with their victims if you don't.
Alright, welcome to the stream.
Obviously, we gotta start with the hostage situation. I'm just gonna like listen to a few things while Trump spoke at the Knesset.
Happening right now, President Trump is addressing Israel's parliament called the Knesset. This comes after the return of several hostages held by Hamas back to Israel's soil.
Let's hear from the president right now as he's been waiting patiently to speak.
Members of the Knesset and cherished citizens of Israel, we gather on a day of profound joy, of soaring hope, of renewed faith, and above all, a day to give our deepest thanks to the Almighty God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
He doesn't even know what he's saying, dude.
After 2 harrowing years in darkness and captivity, 20 courageous hostages are returning to the glorious embrace of their families, and it is glorious. 28 more precious loved ones are coming home at last to rest in this sacred soil for all of time. And after so many years of unceasing war and endless danger, today the skies are calm, the guns are silent, the sirens are still, and the sun rises on a holy land that is finally at peace, a land and a region that will live, God willing, in peace for all eternity. This is not only the end of a war, this is the end of an age of terror and death and the beginning of the age of faith and hope and of God. It's the start of a grand concord and lasting harmony for Israel and all the nations of what will soon be a truly magnificent region. I believe that so strongly. This is the historic dawn of a new Middle East. I want to express my gratitude to a man of exceptional courage and patriotism.
Bro. A new Middle East, a new world, a new order, you would say. A new world order. Wait.
Patriotism, whose partnership did so much to make this momentous day possible. You know who I'm talking about. There's only one. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Baby, please stand up.
What is this rhythmic clapping that they're doing? It's so obnoxious.
And he's...
It's like high school pep rally energy, dude. Except also bloodthirsty somehow.
It's not easy, I want to tell you. He's not the easiest guy to deal with. But that's what makes him great. That's what makes him great.
Right, yeah, that's what makes him great. Being
Thank you very much, baby. Great job.
Impossible for...
And let me also convey my tremendous appreciation for all of the nations of the Arab and Muslim world that came together to press Hamas to set the hostages free and to send them home. We had a lot of help. We had a lot of help from a lot of people that you wouldn't suspect. And I want to thank them very much for that. It's an incredible triumph for Israel and the world to have all of these nations working together as partners in peace. And it's pretty unusual for you to see that, but it happened in this case. This was a very unusual point in time, a brilliant point in time. Generations from now, this will be remembered as the moment that everything began to change, and change very much for the better. Like the USA right now, it will be the golden age of Israel and the golden age of the Middle East. It's going to work together.
It's going to be hot in the Middle East. We're going to make it hot.
Help in getting something done that almost everyone thought was absolutely impossible. We were wasting our time. So many people said, "You're just wasting your time," but we weren't, because we had talented people working with us, and we had people that love your country, and frankly, people that love the region. They love the Middle East. I want to thank my friend Steve Witkoff.
Ugh. Genocidal freak. Traitor. Liar. Coward. War criminal.
You know, Steve was chosen by me. He never did this before, but I knew him as a few things. He was a great businessman, but I know a lot of great businessmen, to be honest with you. He had tremendous negotiating skills, but I know a lot of people that negotiate pretty well, although it is an art. But there are people that can negotiate pretty well. But most importantly with Steve, he's just a great guy. Everybody loved him. Everybody. I mean, I know some negotiators that are so good, but you wouldn't have had peace in the Middle East. It would be in World War III right now with some of these guys. Everybody loves Steve, and they respect him, and they somehow can relate to him. I've known him for many years, and I've seen it over and over again.
להוציא את חבר הכנסת עודה, להוציא אותו מהאולם, להוציא אותו מיד, החוצה, החוצה.
Please expel this Knesset member. Please expel this Knesset member.
להוציא גם את חבר הכנסת כסיף. להוציא את חבר הכנסת כסיף מהאולם.
Expel Knesset member Kasif out of the hall. Please expel him immediately.
Sorry for that, Mr. President.
That was very efficient.
I think I've heard that guy speak before.
So back to Steve. He's...
Oh, Trump, it was like you got shot and got back up to the podium. It was so incredible the way you did that.
But I tell one story because he was so involved, and then we called in Jared. We need that brain on occasion. We got to get Jared in here. We got to get a certain group of people. But Steve started this all by himself. I call him Henry Kissinger, who doesn't leak. Okay? Henry is a big leaker. He leaked. Steve doesn't leak. Steve just wants to get the job done. He wants to do what's right. But I'll give you just a...
He's a big leaker. He was leaking all the time. Henry Kissinger. I like guys that weren't captured and people who don't leak.
It's a quick story because, as you know, he's working on the war with Russia.
Fucking unreal. I'm done with this shit. Oh my god. Israel's demonic plan? Bro. Not only do you take yourself way too seriously, you're also using anti-Semitic tropes in your fucking... How hard is it to just be anti-genocide and not anti-Semitic at the same time? Here's what I was looking at. Before this, never in history have the good guys taken pictures like this. I think this was taken in the West Bank. Yeah, that's how they treat their hostages. Burying my third son, whom I lost along with my wife during the 2-year genocide in Gaza. This is how Israel treats prisoners in its prisons in front of the cameras, and in a brutal manner continues to humiliate Palestinian prisoners and torture them, even though they are supposed to be released as part of the anticipated exchange deal. There's like dogs and shit that they're sicking on them. It's crazy. Watch this.
בעוד כמה ימים עוברים לכלא אחר כדי לממש עסקת שחרור החטופים. זה המחבלים עם מאסרי עולם עם דם על הידיים שמשתחררים ממש בעוד כמה ימים במסגרת העסקה. אלה המחבלים עם דם על הידיים, מחבלים מאסרי עולם שמשוחררים במסגרת עסקת שחרור החטופים.
They're all connected to a rope, with their hands zip-tied.
ממש מכינים אותם לקראת השחרור. עכשיו אנחנו רואים את המסע של המחבלים לפוסטה בדרך לעיון בחלק ציון, משם יעברו לרצועת עזה ויגורשו בדרך לאירוע היסטורי, קבלת חזרתם של החטופים שלנו, החטופים שאנחנו מחכים להם כבר. אנחנו פה בכלא גנות, אפשר לראות את המחבלים, מאסרי עולם.
Remains of civilians' bodies were found in Sheikh Radwan neighborhood in Gaza City after the Israeli occupation forces withdrew during the first phase of the ceasefire deal. These are the bones of a citizen's entire body. This is what remains of this citizen's body after the occupation forces killed him in this place. After they infiltrated the neighborhood in northern Gaza Strip. This is the scene now. After the IOF infiltrated in this area, which had a cemetery created by the locals inside the clinic, and they buried their children in it in a preliminary way, a very preliminary way. And as you can see, the scene now, desecrated. It's so quiet. There's another family. Oh, there's two families. Couldn't find my father in the temporary grave where I had buried him. The Zionists had exhumed the graves of all the martyrs. So it looks like the exact spot we were just looking at. Jabalia. Trigger warning, graphic images. This person is like half decomposed, and they were found on the beach. You know what? I'm not gonna show it. It's too. You know what? Decomposed bodies of children and families found on Gaza City's beach where the IOF were stationed. You get the idea. The most horrific part is their face, where their lips are gone and you just see their teeth. Post is from a suspended account. IOF have planted espionage devices among the rubble and stones in the Gaza Strip, some disguised as building stones containing cameras, recording, and transmission equipment. That's crazy work. This is the Tal Al-Hawa neighborhood in Gaza City. How is destroying these buildings stopping Hamas? If Hamas is underneath the hospital, do you destroy the entire hospital? But they never do, because every accusation is a confession, actually. So, make no mistake, there's no reason for there's no guarantee that Israel will follow this ceasefire.
900 hours GMT right now, and that is 12 noon in Gaza and in Israel. You're watching Al Jazeera's continuing coverage of the first phase of the Gaza ceasefire plan.
Dude.
It's the long-awaited release of the last living Israeli captives that has now taken place. All 20 of them have been released by Hamas. They've been handed over to the Israeli army in Gaza. It happened just as the U.S. President Donald Trump arrived in Israel ahead of a summit in Egypt later on Monday. So jubilation in Israel and an anxious wait for families in the occupied Palestinian territories. The long-awaited prisoner swap between Israel and Hamas is underway. Hamas has released all 20 living Israeli captives as agreed under the U.S. brokered ceasefire deal. They were handed over to the Red Cross in 2 separate groups. The Israeli military has confirmed all captives are now in Israeli custody, and they'll be undergoing medical examinations in southern Israel. These images show the 7 Israeli captives that were released in the first batch. They've now reunited with their families for the first time in more than 2 years. And the mother of one of the captives released spoke to him for the first time in a video call.
אתה חוזר הביתה, כולכם חוזרים הביתה, אני אוהבת אותך. חיים שלי, תודה לאל, נגמרה המלחמה, נגמרה המלחמה, אין מלחמה. אתה בא הביתה, חיים שלי, מה אתה בא הביתה, אין מלחמה.
Well, the release of the Israeli captives was celebrated by an emotional crowd in what's known as Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. That's where tens of thousands of Israelis have been protesting every week since the war began. Many of them have accused the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of sabotaging and delaying previous attempts to reach a deal.
I waited for this day so much. 2 years we've been waiting for the hostages to come back home, for the war to stop, for the soldiers to come back home. This is a historic day. This is a happy day. They're coming home.
I hope to see over 20 hostages come home, and I just pray that they're all healthy and strong and that their families are.
Max Blumenthal, how soon will the IDF attack Gaza? Let's go to Palestine. I don't really care
why the Biden administration didn't want to do this is ideological. There were also careerist reasons. Look at now.
The Israeli hostages knew what they were getting themselves into.
Same time, we're following the live events in
prisoners of
Israel.
war.
We just did that. We're also following the live events in the occupied West Bank and right here inside the Gaza Strip. This is Khan Yunis in the south of the Strip, and we have been waiting for a number of hours now for the 1,700 Palestinian detainees to be released by Israel. It is now happening. We knew that the buses were on their way from the jails where they had been kept in Israel over to the Gaza Strip, and they have now arrived in Khan Yunis. 1,700 Palestinians who were taken from Gaza. You see the standard issue clothes that they're wearing from those Israeli prisons, who were taken from Gaza at various points during the war, and now, as part of this ceasefire deal, being released. We have on site Al Jazeera's Tariq Abu Azoum. You are at Nasser Hospital, which is in Khan Yunis. You've been waiting for this for a number of hours, as have the families, by the way, of those Palestinian prisoners. Tell us who they are, and tell us also what that wait has been like.
Well, as a part of the ceasefire deal that has been brokered between Hamas and Israel, 1,700 Palestinian detainees will be released today. And this is the scene at the moment, as you can quite see now. We can see thousands of Palestinians inside Nasser Hospital are getting ready in order to welcome the Palestinian released detainees. The scenes at the moment are quite intense and emotional as well, where people have been gathering from the early hours of this morning in anticipation of being reunited again with their loved ones who have been detained and arrested by the Israeli military after October the 7th. Those Palestinian detainees are expected to be released within very short time and arrive to Nasser Hospital. And we show different field preparations by the International Committee of the Red Cross in coordination with Gaza's Health Ministry. Medical teams are on the site now, and they are.
I wonder if he's looking for someone who is no longer alive.
Are waiting for them to turn up in this location. They will be completely examined by medical teams, giving the prolonged period of detention in Israeli jails and the horrific conditions they have been enduring in Israeli jails. We have heard from families on the ground that they did not have any further information about the fate of their relatives who have gone missing during the Israeli ground operations across and in multiple areas in the Strip. And for them, they only realize that they are alive once they are announced on the list of release today, and a part of the efforts made by the International Committee of the Red Cross, they have informed the families of detainees to completely get ready in order to be reunited with their loved ones. These scenes are quite emotional, and for now we can understand that 3 buses are approaching to the site in Al-Nasser hospital, and for many Palestinians, they realize that Palestinian prisoners and detainees will be released today in groups and in patches. So we are getting now reports that Palestinian detainees started to turn up to the site. We can see now 3 buses are on the gate of the hospital, and they will be able to shortly approach our site. They will firstly go inside that building that you can see in the frame in order to carry out initial medical examination, and then later they will be released from this direction to be reunited with their loved ones. We can see also some field preparations by local civilian police who are trying to maintain security as well. I cannot really describe how joyful is the scene at the moment, given the prolonged period of disconnection between the families and their relatives who have been detained by the Israeli military. People believe that this moment is quite historic, and for them we can hear now the sound of bullets and gunshots being fired by families who are celebrating the return of the Palestinian detainees. So this is an exceptional day for families, and those families, by the way, have come from different parts of Gaza. Most of them have come from the northern part of the Strip, and 100 others have arrived from the central and southern parts of the territory. They are quite determined to meet their loved ones. They say that they cannot wait anymore, as they have been going through an endless cycle of desperation regarding the fate of their relatives who have gone missing and the later were detained by the Israeli military, and for those who were detained inside schools, shelters, and during the Israeli military attempts to control significant portions of the Strip, Cyril.
Tara, can I check something with you that you mentioned a little while back? Are you telling us that the families who have come here, the families of these men, women, and children, because there are children in these buses, people who have been held without charge by Israel during the course of this war, are you telling us that these families didn't know until today or perhaps yesterday whether their relatives were even alive?
Well, they did not realize any information or even get any source of confirmation by relevant authorities about the fate of their relatives and their sons who have gone detained by the Israeli military. They were shocked. We can see the scale and the milestone of happiness written all over their faces at the moment. But for them, this moment is very exceptional. They say that we have been here since yesterday evening, and they have slept in the open, just waiting to see their loved ones are coming out from the ICRC buses in order to be reunited with them. They say that they have gone through horrific security conditions once the Israeli military started to expand the ground operations across Gaza in October the 7th. And for many Palestinians, there has been a general sense of consensus that the Israeli military has dealt with Palestinian males as clear targets, either for killing or for arrest or detention. That has been a clear pattern recorded in Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia, in Khan Yunis, in Rafah, and all areas that have been marked as an active war zone. And other Palestinians are still waiting here, even in the hope of getting any information about other detainees who have not been yet released, according to the current ceasefire deal and its first phase. So there is a huge sense of anticipation for those families who are waiting here. We can see on the faces now how they are waiting patiently, just for one moment, is to see them alive, to see them without clear wounds on their bodies, without being physically emaciated or exhausted, because they understand totally and completely that Palestinian detainees in Israeli jails have been receiving a very humiliating treatment. And this is not the first time. If we're talking about detainees who have been detained decades ago, they have been also receiving the same treatment. So the equation now is quite different, and for them they realize that this moment is quite symbolic and historic regarding their description for the entire day to be a victory for Palestinian families.
Tariq, these Palestinians who are returning to Gaza, they are returning to a very different place. Between the time when they were taken by Israel and the time now that we're seeing, 90% of homes have been destroyed or damaged, 10% of the population has been killed or injured. There are entire parts of the Gaza Strip where there is simply nothing left. I mean, they might be coming home to find that their families have been killed and that their houses have been destroyed.
Well, let me start first, Cyril, by the January ceasefire. I was extensively covering all developments regarding the release of Palestinian detainees and Israeli captives. And I saw throughout the interviews that I really did with the families of detainees and with the detainees themselves, how they were shocked once they were released from the scale of destruction. They saw on the way from Karm Abu Salam crossing to Nasser, to the European hospital at that time, the scale of destruction inflicted upon Rafah and the eastern parts of the city of Khan Yunis. They say that we were told inside the prison that Gaza now is a pile of rubble, and they were even forced to wait and see different kinds of images for Gaza as a destroyed landscape. And now we can see at the moment that there is some sort of preparation to receive the first batch of the Palestinian detainees, and for now we can completely give our viewers a better understanding about the conditions. Now, the first bus, as you can see, has now arrived, and we can see inside Palestinian detainees inside the bus, and they are now moving to our location here. We can see that bus moving now among the crowds, and people are surrounding this vehicle, chanting and waving for detainees inside. Possibly we can see many Palestinians have relatives inside that bus who have been behind the Israeli bars.
There's too much to say in 30 minutes, but I'm actually, just after 2 years of continuous genocide and what we witnessed, I'm actually stunned that it may be coming to an end, but I've become cynical. We witnessed several pauses over this period, and I think this may just be another pause between wars. I think that it's very fair to say, though, that this, and it's what I've been saying on your show, on our live streams at the Gray Zone for the past 2 years, is that this could have all been stopped with one phone call. And finally, the phone call arrived, and the will from the Trump administration came as Trump became obsessed with his legacy and obsessed with obtaining the Nobel Prize. And he provided instructions to Steve Witkoff and sent his son-in-law from seemingly out of the wilderness, who has a clear stake in some real estate in the neighborhood, to make this deal happen. And the US finally demonstrated some flexibility in forcing both sides to get to a yes without having all terms immediately agreed upon. But the reality is that Hamas had always been flexible. And this isn't just me saying that. This is a veteran Israeli peace processor from the sort of liberal peace camp who had emerged as a back channel in 2024 between the various factions, Hamas, the US, Israel. His name is Gershon Baskin. I've interacted with him for years, and I always considered him to be sort of a, someone who hyped himself up as more important than he was. But it turned out he actually had real access to what was taking place. And what Baskin has said, and he wrote this in the Times of Israel recently, is that in September 2024, the same deal that was just made, but tens of thousands of lives lost later, was on the table. And it was not only on the table, every side was ready to commit to it, except the Biden administration wasn't pushing Netanyahu or Israel. Why? What else was happening in September 2024? That's when Israel began its campaign to maul Hezbollah, to begin to assassinate all of its leadership, to assassinate Hassan Nasrallah as he was negotiating a ceasefire, as he was working on negotiating a cessation of conflict in the south of Lebanon, and they killed him. And the Biden administration, the people around Biden, especially Brett McGurk, who today is working for the Saudis in a series of Saudi arms industry linked tech firms. Brett McGurk became so enthralled with the idea of destroying Hezbollah, along with Amos Hochstein, the Israeli-born negotiator for Lebanon for Biden, that Biden sat around and did nothing. This is also corroborated by Kamala Harris's own memoir, where she said that every time she would bring up the concept of a ceasefire, Biden would say, well, I'm a Zionist, and then he would proceed to ship more 2,000-pound weapons to Israel. So this could have all been done by Biden. Tony Blinken could have had these Israeli POWs and captives who are now being released on the White House lawn. Biden could have vied for the Nobel Prize, but he chose not to. Tens of thousands were murdered. Hundreds are being pulled from the rubble every day that we didn't even know were dead. Gaza is 83% destroyed. And so this is actually the legacy of Biden's failure. And Donald Trump has gotten the quote unquote win after several betrayals of the peace negotiators of his own. So again, my feeling today is anger, bitterness, sorrow, because this could have all been ended a long time ago. And many of the Israeli captives in Gaza who were killed in mostly Israeli airstrikes would still be alive as well.
How soon before the IDF resumes bombing?
Well, right now what they're doing is they've activated their proxies in Gaza. Israel has armed and is protecting behind the so-called 53% line of Israeli control a series of ISIS-linked gangs and collaborator families, specifically Yasser Abu Shabab and his gang, Yasser Abu Shabab, who somehow got a Wall Street Journal op-ed and a feature in Barry Weiss's Free Press, and is just a local gangster whose main achievement was looting all the aid that was coming into Gaza and making sure that it was sold back at extremely high prices to the starving population. They're now in firefights block to block against Hamas, and they have killed notable people in just the last 48 hours across Gaza, as well as the Dagmash family, a notorious gun-running family in Gaza who has collaborated with Israel. And this is being used by the pro-Israel press in the US to paint Hamas as some kind of vicious band of killers because they're actually trying to clean up what's left of their own society. Donald Trump on Air Force One was asked about this, and he said, actually, we've given Hamas the leverage and the latitude to start restoring stability in Gaza. He actually let one slip. You're not supposed to say that. And what's happening now is that aid is actually getting through. The trickle of aid that's coming in is actually getting through because the bandits that looted it throughout the last 2 years are no longer present. Let's be clear. These were Israeli-backed bandits, and their job was to prevent the aid from getting in. And they were promoted by all of the Israeli intelligence collaborators in our own society. How soon will it begin? Well, I've seen instructions that were, that came out in Telegram channels in Hebrew for Israeli soldiers who are guarding the 53% line and behind there closer to the Gaza's frontier with Israel. And they've been told that if you see anyone approaching from Gaza, shoot near them, but don't shoot them. We need to wait until the hostages come out. Once the hostages are out, then we can fire at will on anyone inside Gaza. So I think once Hamas gives up its leverage, as it has been forced to do, we will see more Israeli violence directed against the population in Gaza. We will see more Israeli efforts to push Hamas into confrontation. And I think that there's another element here, which is Netanyahu's own political future.
Here's the comment that you talked about where Trump says, I think this is on Air Force One, he approved Hamas as a police force in Gaza. Chris, cut number 10.
I'm sure you've seen reports of Hamas rearming, instituting themselves as a Palestinian police force, taking, shooting rifles. What is your message to
They
Hamas?
are standing because they do want to stop the problems, and they've been open about it, and we gave them approval for a period of time. You have to understand, they lost probably 60,000 people. That's a lot of retribution. They've lost 60,000 people, and the ones that are living right now were, in many cases, very young when this all started. And we are having them watch that there's not going to be big crime or some of the problems that you have when you have areas like this that have been literally demolished. You have 2 million people, and probably it'll be less than that, but you have close to 2 million people going back to buildings that have been demolished, and a lot of bad things can happen. So we want it to be safe.
60,000 is crazy. Like, I mean,
I think it's going to be fine. Who knows for sure, Katie? But I think it's going to be fine.
Does this mean that Hamas is going to be performing official governmental functions in Gaza with the express consent of the United States government?
Well, first of all, they always have been throughout the genocide, doing all they can to maintain municipal functions and to police the streets and to maintain order. And that was the point of the Israeli-backed gangs, was to show that Hamas can't maintain order and that they need to be replaced. It's also important to mention that on October 7th, 2023, Hamas actually declared its intention to give up governmental control of Gaza and to have a technocratic government replace it. Their red line is their ability to maintain self-defense capacity, to maintain their weapons. They will not give up their weapons. And so what they wanted was perhaps a government of unity with someone like Marwan Barghouti, who's been languishing in Israeli prisons for 20 years at the top, with people from Fatah, supporters of Hamas, all in a unity government, playing a technocratic role in just maintaining the government, with Hamas kind of in the shadows, making sure that Israel couldn't reinvade or resettle the Gaza Strip. But because of the refusal of Israel and the Trump administration to support a unity government, and Israel and the Palestinian Authority of Mahmoud Abbas now refusing to release Marwan Barghouti, the only popular unifying figure outside Hamas and Fatah, Hamas is stuck with basically left holding the bag of maintaining the rubble of Gaza, and they're doing a very efficient job of it. Having been in Gaza twice, I saw them doing a pretty efficient job of maintaining order in this walled-off ghetto. And they are also doing so amid a policy of ambiguity about their arms, which is a major, major catastrophic defeat for Benjamin Netanyahu, who had promised his constituency total victory. There is no total victory for Netanyahu, and you can see a sort of icy rapport between him and Donald Trump at the bizarre festivities today in Jerusalem.
Here's Trump going off text, one war criminal asking another war criminal to pardon a third war criminal. Cut number 11.
She's got 60 billion in the bank, 60 billion. And she loves. Hey, I have an idea. Mr. President, why don't you give him a pardon?
Cringe. Unbelievable cringe.
That was not in the speech, as you probably know. But I happen to like this gentleman right over here, and it just seems to make so much sense. You know, whether we like it or not, this has been one of the greatest wartime presidents. This has been one of the greatest wartime presidents. And cigars and champagne, who the hell cares about that?
Of course, he referred to Netanyahu as the president, and we know he's the prime minister. The cigars and champagne were worth $139,000. I don't know. Does Herzog have the ability to pardon Netanyahu?
It would be absurd. He would be overriding the entire court system.
Right.
But that, what a revealing exchange there on so many levels. First, pointing to Miriam Adelson, who's Donald Trump's top American donor. She's in Israel, kind of engineering the entire ceremony. He mentions that it was because of her and her husband that the U.S. moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which was a major provocation, which I believe actually helped pave the way for October 7th and put more pressure on the Al-Aqsa compound. Remember, October 7th operation from the Hamas side was called Al-Aqsa Flood. He then turns to Miriam Adelson and said, I asked her, does she love Israel more than the U.S. or the U.S. more than Israel? And she wouldn't answer. And I think we all know what the answer is. So he calls her an Israel firster. Trump actually seems to understand the absurdity of the entire moment. And then he mocks the idea of $140,000 in gifts to Netanyahu, because look at what the Trump administration is doing. I mean, its golden age is basically a Zionist gilded age, or we could say gelded age, for the techno-feudalist elite that are basically paying him off. And you have FBI agents walking in and handing bags of cash to his henchmen like Tom Homan, and they're taking it for bribes. So for Trump, this is just business as usual. But the real takeaway here is that Netanyahu does need a pardon, because now that the war is over, his political future is threatened. His coalition could come apart. Recall that just 2 days ago, during the almost equally bizarre scene of two of Trump's real estate associates, one of whom is his son-in-law, whose father was a big investor in Trump Incorporated, Charles Kushner, and Steve Witkoff, when Witkoff mentioned Netanyahu before a crowd, a more grassroots crowd in Tel Aviv, there was nothing but boos. They hate Netanyahu. Netanyahu is unpopular. He commands the largest constituency of any political figure in Israel, but it's a small constituency, and he's hated, and the hostage POW families consider him to be not just a hypocrite, but someone who betrayed them and who refused to make a deal again and again. So he needs a pardon so that he can actually relinquish power at some point. Otherwise, he's going to have to start another crazy war. Netanyahu needs a regional war right now in order to hold together the coalition. And you could see seated to his left was Itamar Ben-Gvir. I mean, this is a guy who has one seat for his party, Otzma Yehudit, maybe 2 seats. That's it. And he's holding the whole thing. He's been holding the whole thing together.
Yeah. I want to play a cut from November 29th, 2023, where a young man on this show predicted much of what you just said now. Can the Biden administration exert enough pressure on Netanyahu to get him to stop the ethnic cleansing once the ceasefire is over on Friday?
Well, the Biden administration could end the occupation of Palestine tomorrow. They could have a Palestinian state while we're doing this live stream. All they have to do is say, no more spare parts for your F-16s, no more F-35s, and it's over. Because Israel its occupation depends entirely on its direct line to Washington.
Imagine that Biden was actually worse than Trump, that Biden could have stopped this then with the same deal on the table that was accepted last week.
Yeah, I mean, that just goes back to what I said at the beginning of our conversation, sourcing Gershon Baskin, the back channel's remarks. But this was something any observer could have clearly known. And I identified the main reason why the Biden administration didn't want to do this is ideological. There were also careerist reasons. Look at Matthew Miller, the State Department spokesman, who day after day, I mean, I was clashing with him literally on October 8th, day after day, lying about the atrocities in Gaza, telling the world that Israel has the right to defend itself and that it's always Hamas's fault whenever a ceasefire is abrogated or when a deal can't be made. And as soon as he gets out of government and starts going on the podcast circuit, he admits that it was Netanyahu every time that would move the goalposts and break the deal. What he can't say is that the Biden administration didn't force Netanyahu back to the table and was also refused to destroy his government. I mean, the Netanyahu has been an enemy of the Democrats for his entire career, and they've always been afraid to shatter his coalition. They could have broke up his coalition if they wanted to, but their concern was always for the stability of Israeli politics and society. And so they kept him in power. They empowered him, they armed him, and they made sure that he could escalate all the way to starting an unprovoked war with Iran that dragged the US into the conflict. So now you have Tony Blinken. There's so much gaslighting going on today, and it's so disgusting. It fills me with rage. You have Tony Blinken on Twitter posing as though he actually was never in government and he's just happy to see a deal. And then you have the Israelis and all of their propagandists telling us that actually the Israeli public wants peace. Jared Kushner praised them for showing that they would never stoop to the level of their enemies. We never saw them stoop to the level of their enemies. We saw them stoop to the level of Satan for the last 2 years. 83% of Gaza is destroyed. Hundreds of thousands may be dead. We don't even know how many are dead. I've lost track of how many massacres Israel committed. Do we even remember when they bombed the Nasser hospital 3 weeks ago, slaughtering journalists in a double tap strike?
Right.
They slaughtered virtually everyone I know in Gaza was killed or had their homes destroyed. Do we even remember November 2023, the Maghazi camp massacre? Who remembers that? Israel dropped 3 2,000-pound bombs in the middle of a refugee camp, slaughtered over 250 people, and it turned out there was no target there, and Netanyahu chalks it up to a tragic mishap. Do we remember when they slaughtered 300 people in a market in the Nuseirat camp to rescue 4 captives and wounded over 500 people? I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And we're supposed to forget and look at these scenes of Israelis supposedly celebrating a ceasefire just because they're getting a few Jewish lives out of Gaza, most of whom happen to have been on October 7th, de facto concentration camp guards, active duty soldiers in the Israeli military who are being treated so much better than the tormented Palestinian prisoners that we see come out. One of them, Nimrod Cohen, he was a tank gunner who was pulled out of his tank. Hamas let him call his mom today on his way out. All right, now take a look at what's happening to the Palestinian prisoners who are being marched out of their prisons, Bukele style, with their hands tied behind their backs, pushed down, humiliated, then thrown into buses in sweatsuits. The filming, by the way, is in complete violation of the deal. So it's just so hard to ignore all the gaslighting and to not be extremely angry about what's happening now. You have this nation that claims to embody the legacy of the Holocaust, telling us not only to forget, not never forget, but that this must happen again.
Chris, play the Israeli hostage reacting very uniquely in the presence of his captors at the moment of his release.
Year 49. Yes, we continue with you. A total of 24 prisoners have been successfully handed over, and importantly, they all remain alive and well. 1 prisoner remains, bringing the total to 25. It is expected that the process of handing over the bodies of 4 Israelis will also be completed in the coming days.
That was a young Israeli kissing his captors. Do you know who this is and why that happened?
I don't, but I can assume why it happened, which is that the Hamas or the Al-Qassam brigades assigned each captive with guards who wound up functioning as their protectors throughout the war to keep them alive. And they did forge relationships with them on some level. Some of them actually became friendly. Others, it was icy. But they wound up protecting them from Israeli airstrikes. There was actually an instance, I mentioned the operation that killed almost 300 Palestinians in the Nuseirat camp. That was to rescue Noam Argamani, who herself had been rescued by her Qassam guards who threw mattresses over her to protect her while their own bodies were exposed during an Israeli airstrike.
This fellow's name, Chris just sent to me, is Omer, O-M-E-R, Shem, S-H-E-M, Tov, T-O-V. I don't know if the name means anything to you.
Yeah, well, we haven't heard that much from him since he's been out, but this was an embarrassing scene for Israelis in general. And there have been other scenes. One of the first hostages released was an old woman from a kibbutz. She was released in, I think, early November 2023, and she shook hands with her captors and said shalom. And it was at that point that Israel began to demonstrate real hostility towards these kinds of exchanges. So look at the contrast between who is coming out of Israeli prisons and who's coming out of Gaza and the condition that they're in. And you can tell very clearly about the value that was placed on these lives. The Palestinian prisoners come out emaciated. Many of them have not shaven in months or had their hair is matted. They still have wounds from handcuffs and beatings. They've been subjected to torture, including anal rape, which has been well documented. And all we hear is propaganda, but still about October 7th and mass rape. But it was very clear Hamas had no reason to want these captives harmed because that was the only collateral they have. From a political point of view, it's all the leverage they have. Now they're going to give up the leverage, and we will see what will happen. But I think that becomes a really perilous moment where Israel could restart the war. It does matter, by the way, that Trump didn't get the Nobel Prize because he still wants affirmation. And it's really up to Trump, once again, to hold Israel's feet to the fire. And he hasn't done that in the past. And especially after thanking Miriam Adelson, I fear the worst.
Max, thank you very much. I have to jump off and get on to another interview, but I deeply appreciate your time. All the best to you. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks a lot, Judge.
Thank you, Max, so much. Coming up right now, if you're watching us live at 11:30, Larry Johnson. At 1 o'clock, Scott Ritter. At 3:30, Colonel Douglas McGregor. At 4:15, Professor Jeffrey Sachs Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.
Representative Thomas Massey, the Joe Manchin of the House on our side, basically. I mean, helpful. I appreciate Thomas Massey agitating on behalf of the Epstein files. Don't think I would agree with his libertarianism in any other context, but when we're trying to attack Republicans, we will take what we can get.
Or some anti-war stuff occasionally.
Sure, that's true. That too. Here he is having, I guess, a pretty fiery exchange with Kash Patel. I haven't seen this yet because this was just happening. Let's get into it. This looks fun.
Gentleman, yes, back. Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request. Gentleman's recognized. So I've got 4 documents I'd like to introduce into the record. The first one is Jeffrey Epstein's 6 story played out for years in plain sight. And Acosta is quoted in here saying, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone." The second document is entitled, "What Epstein's Bodyguard Warned About His CIA Connections." The third document is from Fox Digital. It's titled, "Epstein's Private Calendar Reveals Planned Meetings with Obama Admin Official CIA Chief." And the last document is Wall Street Journal article that highlights Ehud Barak's 36 meetings with Jeffrey Epstein. He was the former Prime Minister of Israel and head of military intelligence for Israel. It may have held that title when he met Epstein, and then, yes.
Without objection, the gentleman will hold for a second. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one UC request. This is Judge Engelmeyer's decision from August in U.S. versus Epstein stating the government.
Looks like they didn't cut out everything, so let me get back to Massey.
Although we did.
That backs up the Lewis Black thing.
Yes, yes. Well, I mean, he's the Acosta quote. I mean,
notorious.
Notorious, and this is just so. We know about blackmail operations prior to this. How intelligence has engaged in blackmail operations. We know how people like Roy Cohn recorded folks to use them as blackmail, very high powerful.
The salience that gay people had to American empire was that they were able often to be blackmailed.
Yep. I think that there's a good reason Trump likes that someone like Pete Hegseth has a bunch of skeletons in his closet, including a rape accusation, or Jim Jordan for that matter. They are to really, really malevolent.
Alright, I absolutely got to call it. We'll see if the ceasefire holds, but I don't know. I'm falling asleep. I'll catch you guys on the flip side. Peace out.
Where's your fucking badge, you pigs? We go hard for Palestine. We escalate for Palestine. We fight for Palestine. We give it everything we got. We do not work with the police. We do not point people out to the police. We do not lay hands on our comrades. When we go hard for our people, you stand out the way. If you ain't with it,